Hack Redcon podcast, and today we've got a little bit of hacker royalty in the room with us. Nubix, welcome to the chair, bro.
Thanks for having me.
For those of the people that may not know you, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your background,
Gotcha.
and what brought you to the pinnacle of stardom that you are today?
Gotcha. First and foremost, I am a Nubix the hacker. Started out in Long Beach, California. Very troubled past. We won't get too much into that. But I would say that I had a love for computers and everything computers ever since the 98 Bondi Blue. Played Oregon Trails on it. I wish I had some type of great story about hacking and bypassing firewalls, but it wasn't like that early on. It was more the love of the game and then hacking my environment, getting out of that crazy environment. So I did that.
Life hacking.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Did that. And then when my son was born, I figured that I can't tell him to do what he really wants to do if I don't do it myself. So saved up some money from the whole AMC stock rally. And then started buying courses, getting into tech. Started off with a help desk job at Galbraith Laboratories out there in Tennessee. And then started taking a lot of courses through Stormwinds Academy, where I met Ken Nevers. And he was like, "What are you doing next week?" We got a cybersecurity conference at Hack Space. It was the first one. Convinced the president and CEO of the company at the time to maybe I should go down there, get some skill sets to help out. Went down there, helped out. I refer to it always as my crossing of the Rubicon. That was the time when I felt, hey, this is what I want to do. I have just been really building out my internal network ever since and leveraging that. I'm actually going to do a talk about that today here, about how to bypass the HR firewall and really leverage your private network to get to somebody who's more technical and land you that job.
So if you're not here at the con, I've said this about a lot of the talks that are going on this week. They'll be available online afterwards. So if you miss it in person, definitely want to see this. You know, I find it really interesting, man. We have very, very similar pasts, but you seem to be a hell of a lot smarter than I was. You know, I'm from the west side of Detroit.
Gotcha.
And unlike you who decided to, you know, try and get yourself out of that, I was actually too deep into it, and it led me down some crazy roads that had me members of, you know, motorcycle gangs for most of my life. Like you know, you said it was your son. You know, I'm ashamed to say it, but I didn't have that kind of internal strength when I had my children. It wasn't until they handed me my first granddaughter that, you know, I had that same kind of an effect. Basically breaking in half just looking at this infant. It was like, how am I supposed to keep doing what I'm doing? You know, and to steal something from the recovery community, it was like, I'm going to wind up either dead, in jail, or in some kind of an institution. And I made a promise that day in that hospital. I said that, you know, my grandchildren will never look at me in fear, and I need to try and find a way to become something that they could be proud of.
Exactly, 100%.
You know, and I am so moved by the fact that you had that kind of internal strength in the beginning, and you know, it's honorable, and this is an amazing story that I wish more people could hear.
Well, because of you, they will be. So I appreciate it.
Well, we're going to do that. And not only that, man, you know, I'd love to get you on my podcast, The Cyber Cognition with Hutch.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, because you are a legend in this space, you know, and you have helped so many people over the years. You know, what drives you to be Nubix? Realistically,
I had really good mentors, right? You know, and these were these individuals that were Gen 1, Gen 2 hackers, right? I say this all the time when I meet people, like a lot of the new individuals, all they care about is cybersecurity. Hey, I want cybersecurity. I want to make a lot of money, but they don't understand the tinker mindset. They don't understand breaking things apart, building it back a better way, how we wanted it to work. We don't care how you guys want it to work. You know, we want to make it work the correct way. And they lost that mindset, right? A lot of them have gone into cybersecurity and they're like, hey, I just want the paycheck, but they forget the essence.
Yeah, I have a nephew who is kind of like my little. I wouldn't say he's my Padawan because that would mean I was a Jedi. So he's my little apprentice.
Gotcha.
As he was growing up, he was like, you know, I want to be like you, Uncle Len. You know, and this kid learned Linux before Windows.
Nice.
You know, and I couldn't get him to understand. I was like, dude, you need to learn Active Directory. Why?
That's the environment.
I want to hack.
Yeah.
And it was like, dude, okay, you just broke into a Windows network. What are you going to, what's your goal?
Right.
You know, and it took me, he was also one of those kids who was like, well, the best practices are yeah, nobody uses those.
We don't care.
So I stuck him on a help desk, and he's finally been in the industry for about 2.5, 3 years, and he's working at an MSP. And now anytime I just want to win the argument with him, it's like, Brian, best practices. And he's like, shut up.
Exactly.
But you bring up a very valid point. When I was a kid, I would, it didn't matter if it was gears, wires. I would tear stuff apart, try to put it back together.
Keyword
try. But we're now reaching a point where, and I've said this to a lot of the other people, but you being in this space as long as you have, I would love to get your opinion on this. There was an article on futurism.com about a week ago that said telling a student giving them the advice of learning to code is actually worse advice than telling them to get a face tattoo. And this to me is terrifying on multiple levels, because the truth is, you've got AI, you've got ML, you've got our LLMs, you can do all of this, but I think without the fundamental knowledge of why, I think we're running headfirst into almost an ethical and a moral dilemma that, there's not going to be enough people with the skill set to correct.
Yeah, it's equivalent to having an individual on the front line with no basic training and give them AR-15 and saying, hey, just shoot and point. That's what it's equivalent to. Why are you doing the things that you're doing? I always say this because I wasn't a real big person in school. It wasn't that I wasn't good at school. It wasn't that I couldn't retain information. It was because the baseline information that they were giving to me, whether it's in textbooks or oral, it was more of like, why? Okay, like this is this. Well, why is it this? We need to break it out and then really figure out what does this do? Why is this wire connected to that? If you can't give me that, then I can't retain and understand the information. I just couldn't
You're
learn
only giving
like that.
me half of the story.
Right. And that's a big thing. Everybody should learn how to code. Why do they need to learn how to code? And you're right. You have machine learning where you can have, something just crank all that out. And it might work, it might not work. But even if it does, do you understand the fundamentals of why it works, how it works, what it's doing?
Yeah,
so,
the flow coding, vibe coding.
Yeah.
These new applications where, it's like, I'm going to just say, I want this. I'm going to put it here, put it here. There are things that we can do in the offensive security world. Let's take Nmap for an example. I can run an Nmap safely. I can run an Nmap that'll blue screen your system.
Yeah.
And to me, it's those kind of things. And it's, the fact that we played with this stuff and we were like, oh, I wonder what happens if I set, an intrusive scan. Oh, I don't want to do that again.
Right.
Without that, what does the future of our industry look like? And just out of curiosity, I'm making an assumption here, but I'm assuming you're Gen X.
Yes. No, not a millennial.
Okay.
Yeah. Very, very cut. 89.
Cusp.
Yeah.
Cusp.
Yeah. 89.
I'll accept that as kind of, we'll call you the last of Gen X.
Yes.
But my generation and the cusp there, we have this natural skepticism against things that doesn't seem to exist anymore.
Yeah, 100%.
And how do we try and get curiosity into a group of youngsters that we've basically taken away the need for ingenuity and creativity?
To give an example, kind of like what we're doing here with Snack Space Con, right, or Snack Con. It's turning a well-known like CTF type version thing and then placing it in the margins, making sure that it's not something, it's part of the con, but it's not official, right? So then it allows you to fill a void. Exactly what you're talking about is you have to spark curiosity. You cannot enforce anything. If they don't want to do something, they're not going to do it, no matter how much you oppress it on them. So just being able to spark an idea and having them run with it. So they feel like it's coming from them. It's not coming from, nobody wants to do what their dad or their mom told them to do.
Nobody wants to be told
right?
what to do.
Yeah, they don't want that. And especially like from my generation, especially from your generation, like authority figures, like we don't play with that at all. So yeah. Sparking curiosity. How do we do that? It just depends. But first and foremost, I think we all have to dig deep and really feel, how do we want to combine the different cultures and where do we want to go? I think DEF CON is doing good things with that. And for the last couple of years, they've been plateauing it up about how we do that, how we take the steps, and who's going to lead that journey.
Yeah. And to be honest, I've been going to DEF CON pretty consistently since about 2012, 2013, and I've watched what I'm going to call the commercialization of our main event. I don't even go to DEF CON anymore for sessions at all. I go strictly for networking.
Exactly.
You know, and then if there's any sessions worth watching, I catch them on YouTube after the fact.
Yeah.
You know, but back to the concept of sparking curiosity, I think that's a really good point. And I also think it becomes harder because when we were younger, we saw the internet come about. You know, we saw mobile devices come out. We're dealing with youngsters now that this is their normal from the point of birth. You know, and to be honest, they don't seem to get excited or surprised by much of anything anymore. I mean, so maybe, taking what we do as offensive security, maybe, like you said, trying to do subcons or little activities, but how do we move this outside of the con or say the B-sides, the DCs, and how do we get this into schools, get it into the communities?
That might be the hard part. You know, they already have their frameworks, their methodologies that they utilize, and if it doesn't merge properly, then they're going to make sure that doesn't work for them, right? I would say a plan of attack that I would do is start doing small things like this, right? Getting those videos out, making those podcasts, and then you start inserting these into set groups little by little until they start just metastasizing, and then you have an individual that's higher up on the food chain that's like, hey, maybe we should try to implement this little thing. Let's do a little beta run, and then from there, if it sparks. When it sparks, then there you go. You have it now. You have something, a launching pad to go from.
I like that. You know, one of the things that I'm doing, and I'm doing this just to see what happens, is I actually just wrote a children's learning to read book that is embedding basic principles of privacy and cybersecurity. To be honest, the reason I made this is because I watched how my daughters interacted with my grandchildren.
Gotcha.
You know, and I have, both sides of the spectrum. I have one granddaughter who they've kept very much away from social media, technology. They live on a ranch and she's very active on outdoors. She rides horses, ranching. And then I have my other granddaughter who was basically given a tablet and by the age of 3 knew how to get rid of ads and find what she wanted.
Nice.
You know, so as a grandparent, I'm looking at both of them and I see how my one granddaughter who's been isolated away from technology, she seems to be developing more of the old school kind of values. But at the same time, I'm terrified of what happens when she gets to the point where she's thrust into the world. And then on the other hand, my other granddaughter, she knows every bit of technology, but she seems almost stunted in her development emotionally.
Yeah, that's where the conundrum comes into play. How do you leverage both of those, right? How do you insert enough of this and enough of that to make a hybrid approach? I think that's going to be the best solution. Because you want them to have that tech background, you want to have that proper OPSEC, but also you want them to be able to have those soft skills, be able to, if they want to play sports, or do whatever they want to do, but if you can make that hybrid approach, I think that's.
I wish there was a way that we could take all the old timers like you, like me, Jason Street, all of us that have been around and actually start doing something for parents. They've got PTA. What about PSA?
Right.
Public security, parental security. But, we need to do something because my fear is, I had this concept after, watching one of my cousins give birth about a month and a half ago. These children that are being born today, when we were younger, it was cool, but they were born into a world of AI, deep fake, all of the technology you could ever imagine. And I'm just wondering, what does that do to the development of somebody? When we were younger, if we saw the 10 o'clock news at night, we knew that was the news anchor talking to us.
Yeah.
Just what does this do to the human psyche where you grow up in a world where you can't believe anything you see or hear ever again?
I mean, it's no different than being in prison, right? Like you don't know, you can't trust anything. Behind every wall, there can be a potential life-threatening event, right? So you take everything with a grain of salt. How you respond to that? How do we respond to that? I mean, again, making sure that they have that proper OPSEC, make sure that they have that security mindset, but also that, they're not so far out of touch where they can't discern truth.
And to be honest, I'm going to close on that point unless you have any final comments. I think the word truth is something that's very scary right now. And maybe we need an entirely new word in the English language, because truth used to be what it is. Then, how many times have we heard, I'm just giving you my truth?
Yes.
That's my perspective.
Exactly.
When I grew up, there was the old saying of there's three sides to every story. Your side, my side, and what really happened.
Exactly.
And into this new future, I think truth and reality are going to become one of the most valuable commodities.
100%.
So what do you got coming up? Any events coming up? Any projects that you're working on? Anything you want to talk about?
Just Snack Con CTF, doing a talk at 3 o'clock. It's about creating your own virtual private human network, leveraging that to bypass the HR firewall and get that job that you want. And then also using that network to have actual great mentors, right? And how to do all that. Because we're always taught like, hey, from the get-go, when you're networking with people, you go out to these conferences, you grab business cards, make some cold calls, and then what? None of that really works, right? It's all about building long-lasting relationships. And also, before you go out, before you do this, have an action plan. Have your action plan have a targeted approach. It sounds very offensive. It is. If you want to be a threat hunter, there's gaps that you need. You need to have basic IT understanding. You need to understand basic blue side of security, the security side. And also, if you don't have that knowledge, then maybe look for those type of people, right? You don't have to find a threat hunter, but find an individual like a sysadmin, get you that basic IT stuff. Then find a blue side person, right? Get you that basic understanding of hardening and understanding network traffic and all that good stuff. You cannot hunt the wire if you don't know what you're looking for. What's baseline, what's not.
Absolutely. So with that, we've come to the point where, we're going to end the more formal action and it's time to bust out the alcohol.
Nice.
So today is whiskey and war stories, my friend.
Yes, sir.
So why don't you reach into that database and tell us a funny, intriguing, insightful story from your past, and let us all inside that head of yours a little bit.
All right, cool. So usually people always want to give you their great side or their better side. I'm actually going to pull out a story that majority of people probably wouldn't say. Because I think it's crucial to understand that, we all suffer from imposter syndrome that we all feel at times that we're not worthy or we could be doing better and we're not. So mine actually started back at Space Con. The first one came out. I was taking Royce Davis's training. It was a network pen test training, 2-day course. The first day I got into class, they're like, hey, we need you to pull down this from GitHub, Dude, I didn't even know what a terminal was. I paid for this course. I didn't even know what a terminal was. I didn't know what GitHub was. And I was really down. Luckily, AWS, that we all love, they had an issue where it was supposed to be multiple accounts. It actually was one account that had, it just had more data that you can utilize to it. So he had to spin it up just by himself, right? So the class didn't get to participate, which we were supposed to. So which actually saved me. Right. So I just soaked up all that knowledge. The second day towards lunchtime, everybody was like, hey, we were done with the actual course. It was now about the report writing. So everybody was like, they wanted to leave. Right. So I stayed there. To the end. And I told him and I was just like, look, dude, I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing. We actually became really good friends. And he's one of my main mentors. And from that point, I remember going back to the hotel, told my wife, I was like, man, maybe this ain't for me, and she was like, no, fuck that. You paid for that ticket. You finished that. So I ended up finishing it, speaking with Royce. And then he actually gave me the mindset of like, hey, dude, like when you started, there was like a little bit of stuff, right? He was like, shit, when we started, dude, I mean, if you can't find it on Google, you're screwed, right? So like nowadays, when we tell individuals like, hey, if you want to do this, this, and this, dude, you can do all that from like, you can find it on Google. You don't even need a trainer. You don't need a speaker. You don't need any of that if you know what you're looking for. That was my war story,
I think that is probably one of the most honorable stories war story we've gotten all day, because you're right. Everybody has imposter syndrome from time to time. I still get it from time to time. And the difference is we push through it.
Exactly.
And, I really appreciate what you said about mentors, because the truth is, there's something to be said about that human connection. You can go learn everything you want, but back to the concept of best practices, just because somebody does something doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right way of doing it. And having the ability to communicate that and get advice, you know, and to that point, I think there's something that needs to be said about the mentors themselves. You know, if you agree to be a mentor for somebody, that's a commitment.
100%.
You know, and don't offer things if you're not going to follow through with them, because you have people who are counting on you.
Yep.
So, you know, I would love to see more of us get involved in the mentorship. I do it a lot on the side as well. You know, we're getting up there in years, man. And I keep telling people 15 years and I'm eligible to retire, and I need to have a complete new crew ready to go so I can pass the torch when the time comes. You know, because I'll be honest, I don't want to live forever.
Me neither.
Too much taxes.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything you want to say on the way out?
Yeah, I do want to, I always bring this up because it's so crucial. It has nothing to do with cyber, but there is a correlation. So one of the biggest things was me like doing even something like this, right? I was so terrified, right? So terrified. But it wasn't that I was afraid of public speaking. It was, I just didn't like talking to people. So like the Toastmasters, none of that worked for me, right? What worked for me was I reached out to somebody named Andrew Bustamante. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Ex-Air Force, ex-CIA, great guy.
When you come from the criminal background, most three-letter organizations, you know, you see him at the conference and you go, hey, nice to see you, but I'm going that way.
Gotcha. Great guy. You know, can't say that about everybody else, but this is a good dude. I took 2 of his street craft courses, and that has helped me tremendously, not even just in basic communication, but also just on my whole career trajectory. Like, so currently, the thing I will say is I work for Infrashield as a cybersecurity analyst, so dealing with straight nuclear. That's what I will say. But just even that, being able to be confident to go in and, you know, taking a whole new regulatory liability, so to speak.
Oh, yeah.
From not knowing that domain and then taking and run with it. I mean, that wouldn't have happened without his course.
If somebody was interested in this course, how can they find it?
Everydayspy.com. Yeah.
Absolutely. Exactly. I am all about giving resources.
Yep, 100%.
And, you know, I'm going to end my side with this. I believe anybody can achieve anything they want in life. You just have to be willing to put in the work and the effort to get it.
100%.
You know, I came from the streets like you did.
Yes, sir.
You know, and if we can both be sitting in these chairs, we can stand as testaments to everyone that, you know, if you want it bad enough and you're willing to put in the effort, you can get it. And you can get out of that hole that you started in.
Exactly. I will say one thing. If anybody wants to connect on LinkedIn,
please.
That's R2600. So that's my information on LinkedIn. If anybody's looking to get into cyber, and, you know, I wouldn't go so far to say, you know, I'll help mentor you, but I will definitely help come up with an action plan, and you can start.
We can give you direction.
Exactly. But I do want to put that out there because I feel like it's not enough to just say, hey, you know, you need to bust your ass.
No,
and get out there.
I agree.
You really need to help have them understand how to create their own action plan.
You got to point them in the right direction to get on that path. And to that point, you know, I'll offer up the same thing to anybody. You know, find me on LinkedIn. I may not be able to mentor you specifically, but I'll help point you in a direction.
100%. Yep.
And with that, thank you for joining me today.
Sir. Yep.
The podcasts of Hack RedCon continue after this. Cheers.